Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take on a Thursday morning for Market Rebellion. And wow, have we had volatility and movement in the marketplace. It's been absolutely extraordinary, especially when you look back to last Friday. We had a big, strong day on Friday. Monday, start off the day, you're running 500 points, only finishing up 10 points. Followed up by Tuesday, a big move to the upside that just continued until we actually rang the closing bell 556 points later. Dow really sprinting on Tuesday. But yesterday, we looked like we were going to be up again, 500 points in the pre-market. Actually only opened around 400 points. And as the day went on, started to pull back and pulled back significantly. Actually finished okay, but still finished up about 228 points. Call it almost 0.9% or something like that. But the NASDAQ really was the lagger and certainly did stand out, although the NASDAQ by the end of the day did make some catch up and finished up about 0.6%. But certainly that was the lagger throughout the day, and technology really was the story there. A lot of people focusing on, has that run started to run out of a little bit of gas? I think it's a little early to make that call, but nonetheless, that's something that we've heard a lot of chatter about. Matter of fact, what really stood out yesterday wasn't so much the NASDAQ, and it wasn't so much the Dow. It was the huge discrepancy in terms of small cap. The production yesterday, the outperformance, 3.5% higher for the Russell 2000. So that certainly stood out. Now, what was driving the markets to the upside early? Well, Goldman Sachs came out with their earnings, absolutely extraordinary. We talked about it yesterday, but when you look at that trading and the revenue from trading and the sheer numbers there, absolutely extraordinary. Then you get the Moderna news about vaccines, and obviously that's very positive. A lot of those different stocks that react every time we've heard from a J&J, from a Pfizer, from Moderna, from whomever, Gilead, across the board, so many different pharmaceutical companies working in partnerships or individually on vaccines, treatments, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is that gave the markets a nice little boost to the upside, especially on the S&P side, where many of these various names that aren't in the Dow certainly were driving the S&P as well. So that was something pretty impressive. Now, I brought up Goldman Sachs and how strong those numbers were. Well, the financials actually finally did participate at least a little bit, up about 2% yesterday. You had the energy stocks also up about 2% yesterday. The OIH, where you're looking for a lot more beta in energy, wow, they were up almost 5% yesterday. So that was a nice, big, solid move as well. Now, the industrials had a great day yesterday. As a matter of fact, Boeing really stood out. Boeing with a nice 4.5% move to the upside. You had Raytheon, you had Dow, a lot of those different components, the industrial space really showing some strength, and 2.5% on the XLI. That's a really nice, sharp move to the upside. Now, I mentioned Moderna, and every time we talk about these various names, what are the names that are going to follow and what are the sectors? Well, airlines, cruise ships, hotels, casinos. We had Wynn, we had Marriott, we had Carnival, we had American, we had United. All those names always seem to be the participants. Now, the names that are on the opposite side of that, Zoom, NVIDIA, Activision, EA, Take-Two, those names were actually definitely what it was pulling on the NASDAQ side of things as well. So when you look across and you try to read into today, what do we see? Well, it's an interesting market as we got into today. The pre-market, we were looking down about 150, maybe 200 points, call it 0.6%, something like that. Really pulling on the markets, you had financials, you had technology, you had energy. The interesting part about the financials pulling on things, Morgan Stanley's report looked a heck of a lot like Goldman Sachs, really, really impressive. And trading, again, really impressive. Wealth management, very impressive. So it's interesting to look over and you see the financials not really participating as you might expect. But again, they did crush those earnings, absolutely crush the earnings. Now, J&J also had strong earnings. You had a big beat. They gave you a great forecast going forward for the full year, which is something that a lot of folks had gotten away from. A lot of these outlooks as they're looking out. A lot of folks say, well, look, we don't have the vision, so we're not going to be able to give that. Well, J&J did, and that was very strong as well. Now, overnight, what really stood out, and this happened yesterday, kind of late afternoon, I guess, as we got in, and I was on the 5 o'clock show for CNBC, the Fast Money Show. We were talking about Twitter, and we were talking about all of the different and security issues, and that certainly was something, that hack that did stand out and obviously became a real focal point because of what the ramifications could be if certain high-profile users were hacked. And that was certainly a big news yesterday, continues to be big news today, and we'll see how that starts to play out. Now, quickly, the market has cut back on some of these losses. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at the Dow right now. We were down, call it 170 points early on. Now we're down about 60 points. Matter of fact, the NASDAQ continues to be an underperformer today. As a matter of fact, down about 1.25%, down over 125 points right now. So the NASDAQ going in one direction. We got the Dow actually starting to recover, moving back down about 60 points, but off of a down 170 or so. And the S&P down about 17 points right now. So what's really dragging on the NASDAQ? Well, if you look over throughout the NASDAQ, all the major names seem to be under pressure, at least in the red. You got Google, you got Facebook, you've got Netflix, Tesla, Cisco, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, all the major names. Add into that some of those semiconductor names that have been so strong. And now you look over at the SMH and it's actually in negative territory as well. And many of those names, Microchip, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Broadcom, all of these various chip names, Intel, in the red right now. So you've got a huge discrepancy of what's really starting to move to the upside in those Dow stocks. And then on the downside, you're certainly seeing it with the NASDAQ names that are in the huge chip space, those massive names in the chip space that have made an absolute extraordinary move to the upside. And now you're seeing a little bit more of a pullback even today, extending that analog devices, all of these various names. Yesterday, we had some pretty good volatility, obviously. And as we traded throughout the trading session, it got pretty interesting, but closed around 28, 29 in terms of the VIX. Here we are today. We've had already some pretty nice moves in the marketplace. We're still trading about 29 on the VIX. So it shows you that the volatility we'd seen some movement there where we'd gotten even up into the low 30s, but you see a little bit towards the 30s. We're hanging right around in that level. Call it 28 to 32, sort of a range where we have found ourselves once again. And we found ranges in the past that have come down, down, down. Well, now we've had a little bit of a lift back up as we have approached 30 on a couple of occasions. So volume yesterday, absolutely extraordinary. And I bring this up all the time because I think it's so important to understand the derivatives markets and how much volume that we are seeing. And it's been absolutely extraordinary, right? So yesterday, 31.7 million contracts trading yesterday. Another really big day of volumes. And you could see it yesterday. I like to monitor some of the volumes, but most importantly, folks, I will put up numbers in terms of what are the leadership stocks of the day, maybe a top 3 or a top 4 list. And as I go through that, I'll also sometimes add in, well, how many calls are trading versus puts? But the most important thing is not in those numbers, which is, are they buying or selling? Are these buy rights? Is this part of something else? Is this just massive spreads? What is it? And so that's the most important part, because that's what we are digging for when we talk oftentimes about unusual activity, which I'm getting to right now. So JD stands out for us today. Now, we talk about these Chinese names and they've had some ups and some downs. There's absolutely no question about that. But we had a nice cycle where the buyers just have been right and right and right. And now recently we've seen that little bit of a pullback. We've seen it in the NASDAQ, seen it in those Chinese names as well. But JD stands out. There's no doubt about it today. Stock was trading about 60.60. We had a buyer of 14,000. This is one of the early hits that we have on our screens right now as the scanners are looking for unusual option activity. Starting to fill up pretty quickly. It started slow. Now it's starting to expand very rapidly. But JD, 14,000 of the September. So we're not looking at July. We're not looking at August. We've got July 24th, 31st, all these different expiration cycles. And you've got all of August, of course. They're going out to September. So they're buying a little bit of time for JD to have this reaction. So you have to understand that. What does that mean? Well, they need the time. They feel like at some point in that time frame, there might be a move to the upside. But also, while doing so, you are paying for that time. So I'll give you an idea of how much you're paying. So September, 62.5 calls. Those are going for about $4.25 to $4.50. So these are not inexpensive options. So oftentimes when we see these, people will say, well, what do you do when you've got something like that? I look oftentimes to spread it off. And oftentimes I talk about when we see some of these trades, the really big trades and a lot of these spreads, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's very smart. And that makes me think that unusual option activity is incredibly smart in terms of did they roll it? Have they already made money? All those kind of different factors. All those things are very important. By the way, gotta love this bull shirt, man. These guys over at the Minnesotan, if you're ever looking for any of the giddy up stuff, the bulls, any of that, the take, they've got hats, they've got shirts, these golf shirts, they're awesome. Absolutely the most comfortable shirts I've ever had. Hats off to the guys over at the Minnesotan. And by the way, very charitable. They actually give a portion of those sales to Twin Cities Lyme Foundation, which my wife is the founder. I sit on the board of that whole thing and trying to help people with early detection of Lyme disease and early diagnosis as well. So I want everybody to understand, you've got to understand these markets. You've got to understand the derivatives world. It's really important. This is where we are. I just mentioned how much volume we had yesterday, 31.7 million contracts. This has been a record-setting year, and I continue to see each and every year. We've said it since 2007, and every year we've gone higher and higher and higher. This is where people find leverage. This is where people find opportunity and ways that they can actually remove some of the risk if you understand how to do that. And a lot of that has to do with getting that knowledge. So get that knowledge. We got some of the best in the business. I think the best in the business here at Market Rebellion. Folks, have a great day of trading.